tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So who here was present when Bhante Sumita visited us, the wonderful Sri Lankan monk? So he visited us when we had the 14 monastics here. And he'd been in robes since he was 11 years old. And I remember sitting with him in the car on the way up to Brahmavihārās, a ceremony we were doing up there. And thinking I was sitting next to a really nice monk, a really nice Sri Lankan monk. And over the course of my 3 or 4 days with him, I really began to feel like the person I was sitting next to was a being that was very rare to encounter in the world. He talked about metta, but you could tell that he'd lived it so sincerely for the last 50 or 60, maybe 50 years since he'd taken robes, that it had become the main note of his whole being. It's as if there was this personality around it, but it was sort of a veneer or a shell. And what was real in him was this pure note, like a tuning fork kind of plucked to that, you don't pluck tuning forks, but struck to that chord of loving kindness. And he would just talk about it all the time. When he spoke here, he spoke about loving kindness and about making it a practice. Many of you will remember, before you walk into any room, thinking of all the beings waiting there and just thinking, may they be well, may they be happy, may they be healthy. Pausing, and then before you pick up the phone from a call, especially from a family member, may they be well, may they be happy, may they be healthy. And how if one did this, that the sense of confidence in sitting in any assembly and coming into any group became prominent and palpable. And he did this. Before he came into this gym with everyone, he stopped and he spread metta to everyone here. We were on alms round with him, and he was talking about the effect that loving kindness has on animals. And he said, oh yeah, like I use this all the time. I've started just try taming an animal from far away, see how it works. And some of you will remember Suchita, the South Korean nun who visited us. And her stories of going up to this mountain stream for the 7 or 8 years when she was in a small hermitage in Korea. And how these families of animals would just come to visit her. She talks about one morning a frog coming up and just staring at her. And then her kind of asking it a few questions about itself. I don't think it responded. But the next day it came up with its whole family of little frogs and just waited and stared at her. The otter who had swam up to her, and she said, you look pretty good. And then she said he took on a movie star affect and showed how beautiful he looked. We were talking to a woman from Portland Friends of Dhamma 2 weeks ago. She talked about her entrance to the Dhamma was she heard about loving kindness and started spreading it to the receptionist at her workplace who she did not get along with. And every day she'd just think about all the good things about that receptionist, all the things that she liked. And she started noticing soon that when that receptionist who used to annoy her started walking through the door, she'd feel glad and actually quite happy. And then she noticed that the receptionist started liking her a lot and actually being really friendly and considering her a bit of a refuge. And this is the power of metta, And the Brahmavihārās, which are the term for these four boundless states of love, metta, loving kindness, benevolence, friendliness, however you want to translate, karuna, how that sense, that genuine wish that other beings are well, that is metta, how that meets suffering, karuna, compassion, mudita, rejoicing, how that genuine wish of goodwill meets happiness and beauty, and upekkha, equipoise, equanimity, which is a bit of a different gem. And Bhante Analayo compares these two different phases of the sun. He says, metta is like the sun at noon. It shines on everything below it without distinction. Karuna is the sun at dusk, near darkness but poignant for it. Mudita is the sun at dawn, sort of accompanied by these choruses of birds and these rising notes. Upekkha, equanimity, is the moon, distant but shining with a light, though not necessarily all its own. And the Visuddhimagga, the path to purification, says one cares for each of these states. Metta is like a mother cares for her child. Karuna, compassion, is like a mother cares for her child who is injured or handicapped, wishing may they recover. Mudita is how a mother cares for their child in the flesh of youth beginning to grow. And upekkha is how a mother cares for their child who's grown and has their own affairs, giving them a measure of space but love at the same time. And the Brahmavihārās, the Brahmas are these, considered these gods, these deities of love and luminosity, equivalent to the jhanic states in Buddhism. But it also just means divine, and vihara means abiding. These are the divine abidings. And the Buddha said that a wise person always dwells in the Brahmavihārās. A wise person always dwells in the Brahmavihārās, one of those four. And that's a profound statement because it means that we can always find ourselves resting in one of these. There's always a doorway open to us. And the Buddha talked about the benefits of the Brahmavihārās. He said that one who develops loving kindness sleeps easily, wakes easily, dreams no evil dreams. They're dear to human and non-human beings. The devas protect one. Neither fire, poison, or arrows can touch one. Haven't tested that one out. One's complexion is bright. One dies peacefully. One attains samadhi easily. And if one goes no farther, after death one attains the Brahma realms. Haven't tested that one out recently either. But there's a deep emotional substrate that these tap into. You're tuning to something with the Brahmavihārās, and it's powerful. If you see its effect on people, if you cultivate these, people will draw near you. They'll feel comfortable with you. And other beings that aren't human will feel that too. Recently, after Bhante Sumita's visit, I've been cultivating this a lot. And there's a seal that I see often, and it started to come much closer to me, actually, after this. And Ajahn, in addition to helping one move towards sleep, it's also a guard against dementia, in a sense. Longpo Pasano talks about meeting Mahaghosananda, one of the most famous monks of the last era in Thailand, and his mind had largely gone. He couldn't remember almost anything. The Alzheimer's had really taken away much of his mental function. But what was left was just love. Longpo Pasano said he just was an avatar of love. It's like mist at dawn. It may be vague, the outline is blurry, but it's ignited by sunlight. So this is our safety, is the Brahmavihārās. And we often search for how to structure our practice. And I think the Brahmavihārās provide a beautiful roadmap towards that. Before I talk about that, there's one teacher I have to talk about I lived with. He's kind of a secret Kruba Ajahn named Ajahn Tong, and no longer as secret as of right now. And he was the last novice that Ajahn Chah ordained. And Ajahn Chah asked him why he wanted to ordain. And he said, I want to fly. And Ajahn Chah said, best to fly over the defilements. It's very Ajahn Chah. But he was profound. I lived with him for a year. And there was a tortoise that they were keeping at the monastery. It got lost and kind of they were feeding it back to health. And it escaped its enclosure once. And instead of making a tortoise speed break for the woods, it just hobbled over to Ajahn Tong's kuti and just sat in front of his doorway staring at the door for hours until he came out. I would find him outside after the meal feeding little pieces of bread to the ants. One monk said, did you notice when Ajahn Tong leaves the monastery, it always rains? And I said, no. And he said, yeah, it's the devas, the angels, kind of lamenting his leaving. I said, okay. So I went up to Ajahn Tong and I said, Ajahn, when you leave, do the devas make it rain? And he said, if I leave, it'll rain. And I said, because of the devas? And he said, if I leave, it'll rain. But just this sense of loving kindness emanated out of him all the time. When we're structuring our practice, because these are the 4 doorways to the pure chitta, in a sense, to the pure heart, these 4 emotions are where we always can dwell in one of them. And the Burmese say that any beautiful Buddha image will have all 4 Brahmavihārās in its face. All 4. So, to begin with, just the sense of loving kindness, metta, which comes from the same root as the word for friend, mitta, kalyana mitta. And just the sense of genuine benevolence towards those around one, meeting the world with a sense of openness. And how I sense you can kind of invoke this in the heart is first, right when you wake up, I've talked about this before, but invoking it so that it steers your whole day along the trajectory of metta. But just having a small mantra like Bhante Sumita used, that's very simple. May they be well, happy, healthy. May they be well, happy, healthy. So when you see people around you, just may they be well, happy, healthy. Although there's one story, there was a monk doing this in airports. It's great to do this in airports towards everyone around you. But there was a drug-sniffing dog passing him, and he just sort of burst it with metta, and it came right over and started sniffing him down, and they had to take him up to a back room and frisk him. So spread metta to everyone except drug-sniffing dogs on duty. But the far enemy of metta is hatred. And the near enemy is partial love. And this is the distinction with loving kindness. People ask, there's a sense when you let go of attachments, if we aren't familiar with what that looks like, it can sound like this cold nothingness. Is there room for love in Buddhism? The difference of love in Buddhism is the difference between the love characterized by tanha, craving, clinging, upadana, which is the word that the Buddha used for how flame clings to wood and burns it to ash. We feed off of those around us. And sometimes, much of the time, love in the world, how the world characterizes love, has this quality of entanglement and dependency. And that's part of the picture. We all work with it. But the movement of Buddhism is not, of the purifying heart, is not to a cold nothingness. It's from the energy of feeding a fire to one of light and blessing. In the Adittapariyaya Sutta, the second sermon of the Buddha, in which he brought 5 of his disciples to arahantship, the first 5. This is the third sermon, I'm sorry. When he actually brought, I think, 1,500? It was a record. 1,250 to arahantship. These numbers are somewhat symbolic, but it was a record. They were fire worshippers. And he saw a fire burning in the distance, and fire at the time of the Buddha was considered spiritual heat. It was to be cultivated, tapas, they called it. And the Buddha flipped everything on its head with his classic rhetorical genius and said, the eye is burning with greed, hatred, and delusion. He turned fire and burning into a symbol of feeding, clinging, and agitation, and he replaces it with the image of light. That's what the Brahmavihārās are. It's an unentangled, liberative love. Because you can't truly love, insofar as you feed off something, you cannot love it in that measure. So we don't turn away from love. We open to a deeper love, to a world that desperately needs love. So this is metta, it's this giving. So before you walk into a room, may they be well, happy, healthy. In airports, may they be well, happy, healthy. But what happens often for people is you'll find that these phrases only work for so long. Who's had that experience? You find a phrase and you're like, yes, I've got it. And then 3 days later, it's like, well, okay. Sometimes you can't go out. But we were talking to Stephen Snyder a few weeks ago, and he talked about this skillful means. He called it innate goodness, which may be a problematic concept in some ways in theravada Buddhism, but you can use that phrase to invoke this pearl of brightness in the heart. It's very gentle, it's humble, it's personal, and it's available. When you don't have the energy to kind of spread metta out, can you just say innate goodness and just touch that gentle sense of warmth towards yourself, that pearl of brightness there? It's right there. And that's a doorway to metta too. It's a humble metta towards yourself, but it's there. You have to find the doorway that lets you touch these Brahmavihārās. Because if we don't touch them, then the issue is we can dwell in ill will. Ajahn Brahmali says mindfulness on a daily basis should be used for two main purposes. One is to keep one's virtue. The second is to not dwell in aversion. We can live our whole lives in a low-grade hum of aversion, which is why it's so important to attend to this. And you'll find that low-grade hum of aversion, it contracts our being. It cuts us off. And because of that core ripping wound, we find ourselves scrambling out, trying to be seen and heard. We were talking to Joseph Goldstein recently, and he said, I find myself sampapalapaing a lot. That's the word for idle chatter. And the only purpose, or he says, sometimes I find myself sampapalapaing, and I have to stop. It's a great word. Let's all say it together. Sampapalapa. Okay. He says, and I know in those moments, the only purpose of me speaking is to say, announce myself, here I am. And we know how that dilutes us. And when you hold it back, he mentioned, every time I restrain that impulse, I feel empowered, I feel energized, I feel potentized. So if you find yourself in these situations of a social situation and feeling left out, of wanting to announce yourself, of feeling disconnected, which is a situation so many of us constantly find ourselves in, instead of going out, instead of scrambling, instead of diluting ourselves into this sort of flailing at the air, can you come in and tap into this Brahmavihāra and trust that that sense of connection and communion can come from within if you tap into it, and just close your eyes, or if that's awkward, just keep them a little open, or go into a bathroom and meditate for like 2 minutes. Bring up the loving kindness, and people will feel it. And the spiritual beings will feel it, and the animals will feel it. You don't need to go out and scramble and sort of, one of the words for the asavas, these deep defilements in the heart that the Buddha spoke about, is leakages. How can we stop leaking on each other? And people will sense that loving kindness if you come in and hold it. Metta. The second, mudita. Oh, and the Buddha said that the apex of the heart's release through loving kindness is the beautiful, is the liberation by the beautiful. Subha vimokkha. He only uses that phrase sometimes, and it's such an amazing phrase because you'll feel that beauty. You'll feel it. That's a signpost. This is correct. And it's also a protection. The Buddha said that if one has done something one regrets, and one constantly obsesses about it and thinks this will drag me to hell, then that in itself darkens the mind. One should instead reflect, that was not good, but I cannot undo what I have done. And then just as a conch blower would make themselves heard in the four directions, even so when one's heart has been broadened with metta, karuna, mudita, upekkha, loving kindness, compassion, rejoicing, equipoise, then any limited karma does not remain. Any limited karma does not remain. The echoes of past regret and remorse have less power. They fade. And he also spoke about, and many of you will know this simile, about how a negative action bearing fruit karmically in the present moment in a constricted mind can have immense results, like a pinch of salt dropped in a glass, whereas the fruit of bad action manifesting in the mind imbued with these four Brahmavihārās can sometimes barely have any result at all, like a pinch of salt dropped in the Ganges River would barely change the taste. And you'll notice that, like, as the mind becomes refined, you may speak out of anger, and there will be a deep sense of regret, of bruising. But sometimes that's it. That's the whole karmic result. Whereas if your mind was constricted and anxious and narrow, that karma might be much bigger. This is a protection, the Brahmavihārās. So karuna, compassion, is how the heart that loves meets suffering. And it's a synonym, one synonym for it, sympathy, is anukampa. Kampa means to tremble, and anu means alongside. So anukampa means to tremble alongside. We tremble alongside each other. And it's a beautiful image, but it does have one pitfall in that it can imply that we're suffering alongside another. And that's not karuna. Karuna is a bright, luminous mind state. The word for a darkened mind is domanassa, and it's always unwholesome. We give to the world not by becoming distraught with the world, but by holding the world with genuine love for those who need it and wishing that they are better, wishing that they recover from suffering. And the way to invoke this and get its flavor, I find one of the best ways is to think of all those little beings around you. If the doorway to may they be well, happy, and healthy is closed, if the doorway to touching your own kind of pearl of goodness is closed, can you just think all the little beings that no one ever thinks about? You know, the spider in the corner, the birds outside, may they be well, may they be happy, may they be warm tonight. And the heart will just grow. And I find that first, I've mentioned this, the first relationship many people can get with an insect is a spider because they don't move a lot, they don't bother you, and you can get a relationship with one over the course of a few weeks because they just stay in the same spot. So I'd encourage people to find a spider, don't clean its cobweb out, just leave it where it is, name it, and just start to develop a relationship with a spider. See what happens. And it's the brilliant thing about the Brahmavihārās is we think we know what we're missing when we kill an insect, or just don't pay attention, or roughly sweep them aside, such that they might be okay, but they might not. We don't realize how big our being could be, how large our heart could be, until you've spent some time actually having some quality time with the spider in your shower. And you might find that my heart is much larger than I thought. There's a resonance here I did not expect. So this is a deep root to karuna. And the other really important use of karuna, compassion, is towards those who are behaving unwholesomely. Politicians, family members, friends, coworkers, bosses, anyone. You don't have to wish them worldly happiness, but you can wish them, may they have the happiness of freedom from greed. May they have the happiness of freedom from delusion. And you can reflect that they're in pain now, and they will be in pain in the future based on these bad actions. May they find a route to wholesomeness and a bright heart. And you can recollect how the Buddha interacted with such beings in his time. Angulimala, who was a mass murderer, how the Buddha, Angulimala chased the Buddha and couldn't catch him. And he yelled out, "Stop." And the Buddha said, "I have stopped because I've stopped harming living beings. It is you who have not stopped." And Angulimala became one of the most venerated arahants, enlightened beings in all of India. There's a story of Ajahn Chah, a gangster from the fishing village where I ordained, near where I ordained. He led the mafia in that area, the kind of local cartel. And the monk who was a disciple of Longpo Cha's in that village took him to Wapapong, Ajahn Chah's monastery. And for 2 weeks, this cartel boss lived underneath Ajahn Chah's kuti. And Ajahn Chah would order him around and have him carry his little bag for him and give him teachings. And after he came back to Bonpei, he called his whole gang together and informed them that they would all be keeping the 5 precepts from then on out. And that was news. And he knew that he would be killed. He knew that he could not sustain his position as kingpin, holding the 5 precepts. So for 1.5 years, he put his affairs in order. He made sure his kids and his wife were taken care of. And he kept perfect morality. He invited Ajahn Chah to come and teach. And then he was killed after about 1.5 years. And yet, the last years of his life were pure. No one is beyond redemption. No one is beyond redemption. Karuna. The next is mudita, rejoicing. And many of you will have heard this Brahmavihāra translated as sympathetic joy. Who's had a little trouble being sympathetically joyful for people in their lives from time to time and found there's a little jealousy there too sometimes, or the comparing mind? Yes. It's really helpful to know that translation, sympathetic joy, is a commentarial translation. The one place in the suttas where the Buddha defines mudita is he defines it as the cure for arati, the cure for discontent. The cure for discontent. So for me, when people wonder, okay, we're allowed these 4 emotions apparently. These are the 4 that are wholesome. What about the beauty of seeing, what about that kind of real sense of wholesome beauty when I see someone do something good, or see a beautiful sunset, or write a poem that feels joyful? What about that? For me, or gratitude. For me, all this comes under the umbrella of mudita. It is this beautiful catch-all for these states of rejoicing that cure discontent, gratitude. Longpo Viradhamma says the creative act is mudita incarnate. It's a mudita act, rejoicing. And it's so important that we cultivate this, because when we enter the Buddhist path, we cut off so many unwholesome routes to feeding the mind. The Netflix account, the HBO, whatever. We need to find alternate sources of happiness. And that's where mudita is. Beautiful friendship, gratitude. Cultivate the rejoicing heart. And when you find that these other doorways to metta, may they be well, may they be healthy, may they be happy, my own goodness, or karuna, may all these little beings be okay, are not open to you, it might be that you need to try mudita. And for me, mudita doesn't live in the same heart space. It's more up here. It's in this upper chamber because it's bright, it's luminous. Just thinking of the Saturday gathering you just went to and all the good people you met, thinking about teachers you love, thinking about goodness. This is rejoicing, gratitude. Mudita is a doorway to liberation too. And your heart can't all be kind of soft and sympathetic all the time in the karuna sense. Sometimes there's really, the doorway is rejoicing and happiness. You need to alternate. And then the final Brahmavihāra is upekkha, equanimity, equipoise. And the etymology is important here. Ik means to look. Upa means over or towards. So Ayananda Bodhi translates this as a bird's eye view. I love looking closely as well. Joseph Goldstein wonderfully translates it as watching the earthbound madness through the lens of Venus. And Venus is the goddess of love, so it works quite well, actually. But for me, this is where you step when you've tried to invoke the others, you've tried to help in certain ways, and there's not an opening. And that's when you can really come back into yourself and just carefully watch. And the example I often give for this is when I'm with my extended family, core family too to some extent, but extended family, and there's so many sankaras, so many patterns and dynamics and arguments, new age, I remember, never mind. So these are the moments where you just step back from whatever it was I was about to say, and you realize there's not an opening here. There's too many sankaras flying this way and that, and you just stay out of the line of fire, retreat to another room, hide in a closet, whatever you need to do, go for a walk. Don't act. And then in the course of 2 or 3 days, say with my sister, I'll find that in the midst of all these other dynamics and echoes, there's 2 or 3 moments, half an hour's periods where I'll find myself sitting across from her at a table, and suddenly there'll be an opening to make a real connection right there. So you're watching closely for the openings where you can actually touch something. But in the meantime, you're not getting entangled. There's a real place for upekkha. It's a very refined and subtle Brahmavihārās, but it is one of the crowns. And I love equipoise, because the sense of poise, like a dancer's poise, it's attentive, it's tuned to the music of the moment, and it's ready for a new movement with grace. But it's not imbued with that meh, which is the quality of indifference. It's poised. This is upekkha, watching closely. And for me, when those other 3 Brahmavihārās aren't available, that's when you just come back and, maybe those other 3 doorways aren't open because there's something else going on. Maybe you have a lot of doubt or anger coming up or worry. And in that case, just use the Satipatthana. Anger. That's Chittanupasana. Or pain, this hurts. Vedanupasana, mindful of feelings, mindfulness of feelings. Or notice the breath, just be with the breath, that's mindfulness of the body. Try the 3 doors of the Brahmavihārās when you can, but when you can't, just come back to equanimity, recenter, come back home. Let go of those things which are distracting and drawing the heart away. So I want to finish with one poem, which I didn't memorize, but Ajahn Kovila printed out for me. And many of you will know this. Who knows Naomi Shihab Nai's kindness? Yeah. Some of you might not know the story behind this poem. I've kind of been in contact with Naomi Shihab Nai before, and she was in a bus in Peru, and it got robbed. And the whole bus sat down in this square waiting for kind of things to sort of settle out and the authorities to come. And she said this poem came to her in a voice. And I asked her, do you think it was a David that spoke it to you? And she said, yes, I think it came from somewhere else than just me. Before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment, like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go, so you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. How you ride and ride, thinking the bus will never stop. The passengers eating maize and chicken will stare out the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you, how he too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans, and the simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak to it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows, and you see the size of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to gaze at bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, "It is you I have been looking for," and then goes with you everywhere, like a shadow or a friend. So wishing you all kindness and love this season. Before we go into questions, would anyone like to share any other skillful recollections or phrases they use for loving kindness? Other doorways that kind of kindle it for you? Cheryl.
Sometimes I'll just do metta phrases, like a radiating metta, just metta, metta, metta. And, as I'm walking, if I'm really upset about something, sometimes the phrases themselves aren't enough. It's like it opens it up for me.
Metta and radiating. I've heard baby owls is a good fallback as well.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Hayden. A willingness to stand near to things. That's beautiful. That echoes Longpo Sumedho's peaceful coexistence with the unwished for. That's really beautiful. Willingness to stand near things. Someone online?
I like to wish may all beings be free from anger. May they be free from jealousy. May they be free from ill will. May they be free from mental suffering. And may they be free from physical suffering. And may they live happily.
What's your name?
Marcelo.
Marcelo. Thank you. We couldn't see the name on there. That's beautiful. Thank you. Bonnie? Ryan's going to get a workout.
In college, I took a metaphysical class, and we were taught about the white light and the white protective light that you put around things. And still to this day, like decades later, I use it. And you talk about having three phrases. Mine is safe, protected, and loved. Oh. And I've tried other words, and it's always the same three: safe, protected, and loved. But for me, the white light, when I'm on planes, I put it around planes, around other planes that are taking off. And for me, that's what I use as metta a lot. But that white light really evokes a lot in me. So that's what I use.
Hang around Bonnie. That's good.
You'll get the white light.
Yeah. One more person on Zoom.
Everyone, what had come up for me was, may all be granted unconditional, eternal, and immediate peace of mind, body, and spirit. That's been with me for years. I'll pass.
Thank you, Josh. There's someone there who I can't see who it is, but Kim.
When I am working with metta for strangers or people, where there's suffering a lot, often what feels supported to me, a couple of things, may they be safe and protected comes up a lot. But also I find that I'll work with, may they be free from harm and the intent to harm. And that I find that's really supportive to the heart when, you don't have control over other people's choices, but you can wish that they're free from harm and the intent to harm. I find that supportive as well.
Thank you, Kim. And one more on Zoom.
May I meet this too, all of this, with kindness.
Thank you, David. Okay, and we can just open it up for general questions. And if anyone else remembers any of their metta phrases, feel free to share those as well.
Just while someone's raising their hand, just try to take it as a challenge for 1 week to like really cultivate loving kindness and see if people start to comment. Just give it a try and see what happens. But yeah, questions?
I was wondering about the example of the spider and the receptionist and the interaction between sort of how we create the world or how it is like a dream that we, if we think a certain way, we start, it could be psychological, we just start noticing it, or it could be more than that. Just wondering what your thoughts are on how to think about that.
Yeah, I think that cultivating loving kindness just does have a very felt effect in speech and body. For example, I really feel like my work with, say, my speech and action, like I really have put in as much effort as I can in those areas. I continue to, but I really realized like what the limiting element in the chemical reaction was the undergirding of loving kindness, which could really buoy the whole sense up. And I think that was a really powerful thing to lean into. But I also think that loving kindness can be felt. I mean, I believe in the unseen. So I think that it can be felt by beings as well in ways that are a bit mysterious. But even if it's just people sensing genuine care, I just find it really does, people do read it, they do see it. So as to the ontological interplay of our own consciousness and the physical world, I'm going to leave that one aside for now because the Buddha did it. So.
Thank you for the talk today. Metta practice is something my wife Betsy brings up often, and gratitude is something I go to easily, but I do have a lot of jealousy and judgment, and it's a comment, not a question. But I was out walking today, which I often do, and there are things that trigger me, like someone with a nicer house or someone whom I worked with, and I go, they're more, they're better at what they do, or they're taller, better hair, better looking, kind of the usual stuff. Yeah, the usual stuff. That's why I come here. But today I actually was passing one of those people's business, and it was easier to send them loving kindness. It was kind of like, one of my habits is to always notice later that when I find out something bad happened to someone whom I've always envied, I go, God, here I am getting that lesson again. It doesn't pay to be jealous because everyone has their hardship, but I keep, these lessons take years to learn, because like, I heard, that person got sick and died. I might have been jealous of them the whole time. And so I want to work at it more to kind of give. I have a sister who's dying of cancer, and I need to send her loving kindness. We don't have a relationship. And sending metta rather than some sort of angsty, selfish, is a negative feeling. So thank you very much for the talk. And then going into a room and kind of going, to get rid of that anxiety, if I send the blessing in advance, it turned out there's nothing to fear in there. So thank you very much. Thanks.
Just to say quickly, jealousy is a ridiculous and insane emotion, but so human. Even as monastics, we give up basically everything, and then we give up more, and still I get jealous of Ajahn Nisabho's robe. Like getting jealous of other monks' robes is a super common thing. And his bald spot is less visible than mine from certain views. So
I love that. That's beautiful. Oh.
That's why I come here, Ajahn.
Thank you, Ajahn, for the talk. It just brought up two stories. I know there's a story by Jack Kornfield who says a lady was on retreat meditating in a train station, struggling with her practice, and he told her to go do metta for the people in the train station. And this man got off the train, and she saw him, and she was directing her metta to this person, and he walked right up to her and said, I've never done this before, but you seem like a really kind person. I'm going through something really difficult. Would you pray for me? And she was blown away. And from that story, fast forward a number of years, it was Mother's Day, and I was very feeling angry and resentful to my mother for multiple things. Couldn't bring myself to call her, send flowers. And it was 10 o'clock at night, and I thought, well, I'll send an email. Sitting in front of the computer, and I'm like, I don't know what to say to you. So I said, well, I want you to know, I wish for you to be happy. I wish for you to be peaceful. Typed out the metta phrases and hit send. Like, can't go wrong there. The next day on my way to work, I get this response back from her, an email that says, you're so beautiful and kind, and I'm so proud of what you've become, and despite everything that has happened in the past. And that was the first time in 40 years that she acknowledged that maybe there was difficulty growing up. And that wasn't not her language. And I just burst into tears on the train. It was so powerful, just a real life example of the power. And I want to put in a plug for Michelle McDonald, Insight teacher in Canada. On Insight Timer, there's a beautiful metta practice she guides, and it's more just an embodied somatic version of metta without phrases, and really super powerful. And the last plug for Michelle McDonald, people may not know that I think she was the inventor of the rain practice. And she seldomly gets the accolade for having created that, I think. So, thank you.
That's beautiful. And for the record, I don't actually come here because of Ajahn Kova's bald spot. I feel bad when I make jokes that aren't totally honest. But one other thing is about the jealousy. I just find it so, like Ajahn Kova said, so human. And if it's coming up, I think that's the beauty of loving kindness is you know what it's like to encounter someone with that kind of glow. And it's one of the most profound, people like that, just, there's something awe-inspiring about them. So whenever I feel that kind of machination of comparing, the knowledge that just coming inward and cultivating that bright heart is the best investment I could possibly make in a bright chitta that needs not be compared to anyone, that will be a beacon in and of itself, is such a powerful recollection for me, because it steps underneath all the worldly accolades, but you're in good company. And yeah, robes are a common monk jealousy thing. Our mind's attached to the stupidest things. So yeah, once you have that spiritual strata to step on, it makes it easier to let go of that stuff as well. Thank you for sharing that, Glenn, as well.
My question has to do with anatta and not self. And this mind is so filled with me, mine, I. And I had this really lovely experience the other day. I was driving and just was sending good wishes out and could feel like the thinning of me with that. And I was just wondering if you could speak to the Brahmavihārās as a good tool for thinning self. I
I think that's just a common experience. I think one of the reasons we coalesce this self, and in Buddhism, the creation of self is an activity. Asmi mana, etang mama, this is mine. Eso asmi, I am. Eso me atati, I am this. It's coalescing a self that can find happiness, that can be protected. And when you tune to the Brahmavihārās, there's a sense of safety, of communion, of widening of spirit. And I find there's just less need to touch that. And I think it's why, aversive characters can especially use metta. I'm not saying you're an aversive character, Suze, but people sometimes really, it sounds really wishy-washy and kind of airy-fairy. These are powerful states if you can step into them and find a language that works for you. And I'm surprised consistently, like, by which language works. Like, when you're in traffic, you might be like, none of the phrases are working, and then you're like, may this person get to where they're going on time. I'm sorry for being their traffic. I'm sorry that I'm your traffic, or like, there's these doorways you don't expect, and to just keep searching for them. Like, find ways to keep this going, and it'll really shift a life, I think. So, yeah, it thins the self naturally. You step into a deeper resonance. I think we do have to wrap up.